You are listening to the Fly the W670 podcast. It's season 3. It's episode 37. The Cubs take round 1 from the Brewers. Don't forget to listen, download, review. Most importantly, subscribe to the podcast. Follow on the socials, Fly the W670 on Twitter, Instagram, and Fly the W on Facebook, or email Crawly and I, flythew670 at gmail.com. Crawly, happy Sunday and happy Cubs take round 1 from the Brewers.
Yeah, that was one heck of a weekend, Dustin. I mean, it always is when these two get together, but you know, with the Craig Council thing, there's just a little bit more gas on this fire.
A little bit more gas, yeah. Gas is a good. They try to downplay it, but I think in the stands and listening to Pat and Ron and Zach on the radio and catching the games on marquee, you could feel a little bit more. I felt it coming through the speakers anyway.
Absolutely. And the way it started off, you were, I got to tell you, I was pretty worried about this weekend.
Well, Friday was just an absolute disaster. Just a disaster. Looked almost too easy until it wasn't.
Right. And Dustin, ever since the Cubs went to New York, we kept seeing a pattern, right? Great starting pitching, bad bullpen, and no offense. And that's what happened on Friday. The bad luck starter on Friday was Hayden Wesneski. He had a quality start going 6 1/3 scoreless innings. He only gave up 3 hits and he tied a career high with 8 strikeouts. He is a completely different pitcher than he was last season.
Yeah, he looked really good. He looked fantastic.
And you're seeing them build up his innings. It started out, like 3 innings. Now it's up to 4. Now it's 6 1/3. I mean, he's getting there, but unfortunately, he got no run support as the Cub offense made Joe Ross a mediocre starter with a career record of 27-31 with a 4.29 ERA. Looked like the second coming of Nolan Ryan.
Yeah, when we previewed this thing, I was like, "This is a game they should win." This was the one that you circled, right? This was the one that you thought was going to go their way.
Absolutely. That's why I said 2 or 3 because I thought the first 2 games were going to be cakewalks.
Those were the comfortable ones, right?
Right.
This guy's coming back from a second Tommy John. Right.
Right. He only pitched like 17 innings the last 2 years, but the only run that the Cubs got came on a solo home run in the 6th by Christopher Morel. He is heating up. That was back-to-back games with home runs for Morel, but that's the only run the Cubs would score. Nico and Bush hit doubles that they were left stranded. The Cubs were 0 for 5 in runners in scoring position. Dustin, I know you say it all the time. It's hard to win games scoring only 1 run.
Right. It's almost impossible. I mean, literally impossible to do that. So,
and then add that the bullpen for the Brewers pitched 3 scoreless innings. Let's talk about the Cubs bullpen if we must. Richard Lovelady, aka Dick Lovelady, comes in and finishes the 7th for Wesneski, and he gets the first out in the 8th. And so Council called on Adbert Alzolay to get 2 outs. He's going to be facing 2 righties. We've discussed how lefties kind of are trouble. Dustin, he gave up 4 singles, allowed 3 stolen bases, and got only 1 out before getting the hook before Colton Brewer came in to get him out of the inning. What bothers me is not the hits he gave up. Adbert's been struggling with the home run ball all season. He's given up 5 of them, right? But on Friday, it was 4 singles, 3 of them weak that just missed the glove of the infielders. Only the single by William Contreras was really hit hard. The first single by Jackson Chourio was infield single. It was too slow. Nico got to it, but he pocketed it. Then came Contreras, who always hits the crap out of the Cubs. He hits a single, which was a very good single to tie it. Alzolay struck out Tyler Black, and then Willie Adames hit a weak seeing eye single that went right between the gloves of both Swanson and Horner. And then Jake Bauers hits a single that went just over the head of Dansby Swanson. So you had a lot of weak contact that just found holes. What bothers me, Dustin, is the 3 stolen bases. Okay.
Yeah.
You have a 1-0 lead. You cannot let a runner get in scoring position in a 1-run game. He wasn't looking over. He wasn't stepping off. Nothing. So all those weak singles, they were just as good as doubles.
They were doubles, right? Great point. Yep. Mm-hmm.
You got the runners. The runners were sitting at second, and so that's the trouble. And so, Dustin, you and I were texting. We were like, "What's Council doing?" And so I'm glad the beat writers did ask Craig what was going on, and he said Hector Neris and Yency Almonte were down Friday after they went back-to-back days in New York. Palencia and Keegan both threw Thursday, and throughout their careers, neither of them have really pitched in back-to-back games.
But eventually you got to get there, right? Eventually you have to get there to be a back-to-back guy. I mean, I'm with you. I'm glad he explained it because I was begging for an explanation.
Right.
So I'll give them credit for that, but that doesn't mean I have to like the explanation I got.
Right. And then the other thing I would kind of look at is when you take a look at all the guys that were unable to pitch, that left you 3 after Lovelady was taken out. That was Alzolay, Leiter, and Colton Brewer. So I don't understand. Maybe, what you're trying to do with Alzolay is get his head straight, right? And so you don't want him to be in high leverage situations, but you put him in the 8th inning of a 1-0 game against your division rival for first place on the line. I mean, that's
right.
How much
that's
high
as
leverage
high.
you get.
Right, exactly. That's as high as leverage as you can get.
I'm just wondering if Mark Leiter could have gotten the 5-out save.
Well, that's what I mean. Okay, they were getting to Leiter for a 4-out save, but first you have to get to that save to get that save, right? It just doesn't happen that easily. So,
and you sometimes take a look at who you're facing, because Alzolay was facing the top of the order, right?
Yep.
And so I know that they didn't want him to face any lefties, but I mean, maybe you just go with, sometimes the game can be won or lost in the 7th or 8th inning. So I would have maybe gone with Leiter before Alzolay, get the harder batters out and let Alzolay get the bottom of the lineup.
Right. That's another way to look at it. No doubt about it. That's a good point.
So that's one of those things that you sit there and you get frustrated. And I know we all are right now, but here's what Craig Counsell had to say about Adbert.
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out. I mean, I think going in today, like there was, he had given up some home runs, pitched fairly decent besides that. Today we got some, we got some 2 ground balls that just were hitting bad spots, and then a sharply hit ball that hurt us. We let up some stolen bases that hurt us for sure. So it feels awful. I mean, it feels bad for sure, and you feel for Adbert for sure, and he's struggling right now for sure. But we need Adbert. We need Adbert to be an effective member of the bullpen, and we need to keep giving him opportunities to do that.
And I agree with them. Like I said, I just didn't like the leverage of the situation. But Dustin, I hear all the time, every time people ask me, send him to Iowa, give him a phantom injury, do this, do that. You got to get guys that give you innings. And I'm putting this up here if you're on 670 The Score on the YouTube channel. It's showing you right now the bullpen that the Cubs have. And Hector Neris cannot be sent to Iowa because he's a veteran. Okay, so it's past that point. Mark Leiter has no options. Adbert Alzolay has no options. Yency Almonte has no options. Keegan has 1. Daniel Palencia has 3 options. Richard Lovelady has 1, and Colton Brewer nothing. So what that means, if you don't have options, then you have there's a potential that they're going to get picked up on waivers and you lose them. And I don't think the Cubs I know they have depth, but you see how pitchers can get injured sometimes. They're not going to give away one of their best relievers the last 2 years for nothing. What's wrong with him? I don't know. But again, stop putting him in high leverage situations until he proves he can.
Right. Totally. I couldn't agree with you more. Could not agree with you more. All right, let's put the bad game behind us now. Let's move on. Let's move on to Saturday's game. But we had as we go through this one, we had heart attack Hector yet again.
Oh yeah, and it was Jameson Taillon versus Tobias Myers. And like I said, after making Joe Ross look like a Cy Young candidate, how would they do against Tobias Myers? Started out good as Nico hit a leadoff home run, his first home run of the season. Cubs are up 1-0, but then the Cubs have an opportunity to knock him out early. They left the bases. They had the bases loaded with no outs. They scored a run on a Michael Busch ground out to make it 2-0. Dansby then walked to load the bases a second time, right? So you got this guy, Tobias Myers. He's on the rope. You just got to get that knockout blow, but they didn't score any more runs. And I guess, Dustin, like when the bullpen's struggling this much, you got to start. You can't make it every game a 1 or 2 run game.
Right. Yeah. Everything is so tight and so. Oh my God! Saturday was just. I mean, thank God they won the game, but what a ride.
Luckily, Christopher Morel's on one of his patented home run streaks right now. He hit a 2-run blast to make it 4-0. So that was Morel's 4th homer of the week, and Patrick Wisdom hit a solo homer in the 6th to make it 5-0. Well, that ought to be good, right? And then not only that, another Cubs starter dominating. This time, Jameson Taillon. Dustin, he's came in with a 1.59 ERA in his last 8 starts pitched in Wrigley Field, right? And so this was another gem, 6 innings pitched, gave up no runs, 2 hits, 2 walks, 7 Ks. We keep talking about how outstanding he's been since coming back, and Saturday was no different. But again, the bullpen, the culprit this time, Keegan Thompson. You remember, Dustin, that Keegan started out great since being called up on April 12th. He didn't give up a run in his first 5 outings. Then he ran into trouble against the Mets on May 2nd, giving up 3 runs, only one of them earned. But the reason only one was earned, the error was on Keegan, right? Mm-hmm. And so Keegan comes in to relieve J-Mo in the 7th. He gave up a leadoff walk, great, then a triple, a homer, and a single before Counsell gave him the hook and put in Mark Leiter. Leiter gave up a double to Sal Frelick, and an error by Mike Tauchman allowed a run to score. And just like that, the game was 5-4. But Keegan didn't record an out and gave up 4 runs on 3 hits with a walk. Now, luckily, Michael Busch led off the 8th with a triple and scored on a Patrick Wisdom single. And that gave the Cubs what turned out to be the winning run there.
Massive insurance run, right? Massive, yeah.
Right. The Cubs took a 6-4. You talked about heart attack. Hector gives up a leadoff single. He does get Jackson Chourio to fly out. Sal Frelick singled, putting the tying run at first. William Contreras singled to score Frelick and make it a 1-run game with the tying run now at second. The winning run at first with 1 out, but somehow Hector got Tyler Black to strike out and Willie Adames ground out. And then we all got to breathe a sigh of relief as the Cubs won this one 6-5. But Dustin, the Cubs were 1 for 9 with runners in scoring position.
Yeah, I almost was on the verge of telling Alexa off. I was outside doing yard work, taking in that game, really enjoying it, and it was like, I can't do this. I'm like, I can't do this.
So, you do get the split, which is awesome, but I guess you and I were talking in the last podcast, you had to get those first 2 games because Freddie Peralta was coming up, and Freddie has owned the Cubs.
Freddie's owned the Cubs. Yep, Freddie has owned them.
But the Cubs had their own ace up their sleeve, Javier Assad, right? How about that? Continues
on Cinco de Mayo, the Mexican-born pitcher on Cinco de Mayo.
First time that's ever happened for the Cubs, and he pitched a quality start. 6 scoreless innings, gave up 4 hits, 3 walks, and 4 Ks. Dustin, he's now lowered his ERA to 1.66. That's 4th best among qualified pitchers and the best ERA in the National League. Now, we, again, talked about Freddie Peralta, how he's owned the Cubs. Ian Happ 1 for 20, Swanson 0 for 8, Magical and Wisdom 1 for 7. The team slashed 118, 212, 211 coming into this game. But Freddie was off today, man. He was struggling with his command early. He walked 2 in the first, 1 in the second, and 1 in the fourth. So his pitch count's going way up, right?
Yep.
The Cubs finally break through in the 5th with 1 out. PCA singled. He stole second. Amaya was hit by a pitch. Then Nico doubled to score PCA and Amaya, and the Cubs were up 2-0. Tauchman grounded out to move Horner to third, and then a wild pitch by Peralta scored Nico. Now it's a 3-0 lead. Ian Happ walked, reached second on a pass ball by William Contreras, and then Christopher Morel walked for the 3rd time in the game. Busch struck out to end the inning, but Peralta wouldn't come back after that, so he went 5 innings. He gave up 3 runs on 3 hits, 5 Ks, but a whopping 6 walks plus a wild pitch. That's not well for Freddie Peralta.
No, that's so unlike him. The free passes and and the free passes burnt him in the end, right?
Right. And so Dansby Swanson homered to make it 4-0 in the 7th. Christopher Morel did not walk, but he did hit an RBI single off reliever Jansen Junk to make it 5-0. My God, like if you're going to be a pitcher, isn't that the worst last name?
I was just going to say the worst last name. Yep.
The
old junk ball pitcher joke, right? Yeah.
Right. When you got guys like Blaze and stuff like that, like names like that, that's cool. Jansen Junk. But Yancy Almonte, I thought looked really good. He pitched 2 scoreless innings.
Finally, that's the best he's looked, I thought. That was the best he's been.
I think, to me, Yancy Almonte, I wasn't sure about it. He was kind of part of that Michael Busch trade. But he has really kind of looked, to me, when you look at his numbers, he's really looked solid. And who's going to take that closer position? I don't know yet. I can't give you an answer for that. I just know that when I've watched Almonte and a lot of these guys that they're using, sometimes they're using them for multiple inning roles like they did with Yancy. But he has looked great. But we've seen that a lot with the Cubs. For the last 3 times that he's pitched, Yancy hasn't given up an earned run. Right, so that's what we're looking at here. And it keeps looking good and better and better. And the other one that keeps looking good is you saw Daniel Palencia come out today. And to me,
like that a lot.
He was, again, he's throwing triple digits. Okay. And so he's young, and that's what's kind of, he's going to have good days and he's going to have bad days. And that's the thing that you get when you have some of these young pitchers. and you don't want, obviously the bad days are not good, but for me, just looking at Palencia, he's always someone that I thought had closer capabilities. It's just a matter of, everyone's always going to have a bad day, right? Like, that's going to happen when you're a pitcher. You're going to have a day where your stuff's not good. You can't locate. God only knows. We're coming up on the anniversary of Kerry Wood's 20 strikeout game, which is going to be tomorrow, the day that this episode's released. Kerry Wood says on that 20K game, it was the worst bullpen he had in his life. He thought he was going to get shelled. And the very first pitch, he overthrew the catcher. He threw it over his head and hit the umpire in the mask. You're going to have bad days. It's just, how long of a stretch can you go without having a bad day, right? You can go 10, 15 games without giving up a run or without blowing a save. Okay, now you start to look at it. But when you talk about guys that miss bats, that's what Daniel Palencia gives you. Anytime you got a guy and you say, well, Adbert gave up a hit here, whenever you make a hitter makes contact, there's a possibility that ball can be put into play. It's just what happened to Adbert the other day. But when you miss bats, you don't have to worry about it. And that's what people are valuing more and more out of the reliever's role.
Yeah, it was awfully good. So final thoughts on this one. The Cubs take 2 of 3. They are now tied for first place with the Brewers, who get the heck out of Dodge. And we're going to talk about it in a little bit. But now the Padres come to town.
Yeah, Dustin, I just was happy. As we talked about, I'm up north of the Cheddar Curtain still, and so a lot of Brewers fans were kind of just sitting there licking their chops, especially after Game 1. When because Council always had those good bullpens up in Milwaukee, and this has just been a struggle for the Cubs. And so, once they won that first game and they figured that Freddie Peralta would win the second one, I'm glad for Craig. I still really like him. We're never going to agree 100% with any manager, right? But I think that he's done a great job. The fact that in the month of April, the Cubs broke their record for victories in the month of April, better than 2016.
And Justin Steele threw what, 4 innings? How many innings we got out of Justin Steele?
Justin Steele threw 4 innings. You didn't have Jamison Tyone for the first 3 weeks. You didn't have Patrick Wisdom the first 3 weeks. You
haven't had Bellinger or Suzuki for half the month.
It's mind-blowing to think that that's where we are. And think about if Adbert was just normal and Kyle Hendricks was only semi-bad, what their record would be.
Right. Pretty amazing. No question about that. This is the Fly the W670 podcast. It is season 3, episode 37. The Cubs take round 1 from the Brewers. Don't forget, listen, download, review, subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. Leave Crawly and I a 5-star review if you don't mind. And don't forget, you can email us and you can also watch us. That's right. You can watch us on the 670 The Score YouTube page. In this segment, Crawly interviews Sara Sanchez of Bleed Cubbie Blue about her article on the Cubs defense, which has not lived up to the expectations so far this season.
Joining me now on the Fly the W podcast, I'm happy to have on my friend Sara Sanchez. You find her work at Bleed Cubbie Blue. Sara, how are you today?
I'd be better if the Cubs hadn't lost in extras earlier today, but I'm doing okay. Crawly, it's always great to talk with you about the Cubs.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned the loss today to the Mets because, one of the big plays in the game that happened was Keegan Thompson made an error. The ball was hit to him. He drops it, and then he kind of lollipops it over, and that just kind of opens the door for the Mets to tie it up. And now the Brewers are coming into town. But, Sara, you wrote an article in Bleed Cubbie Blue, and it's called "The Cubs Defense is Struggling." And I think a lot of our listeners on here are kind of in the same boat. We all see what's going on. We just can't figure out what the heck is happening.
Yeah, so a couple of things are weird about this Cubs team. And I just want to preface this by, we're in a good spot, right? Like, the team is 19-13. It is better than you could possibly have imagined. If you told me the Cubs were at 100% health and they were 19-13 on the 2nd of May, I would have been ecstatic. That's exactly what I was hoping for from this team. So they are overperforming expectations. If you tell me they're 19-13 and Justin Steele's on the IL, they didn't have Jamison Tyone for like the first 4 weeks. Seiya Suzuki's on the IL. Cody Bellinger's on the IL. From a results standpoint, we should all be very happy. But what's weird about the way they've put this together is that there are key components of the Cubs' depth and their roster that are not performing the way we think they should. And the defense is certainly one of them. The whole reason that you have Dansby Swanson and Nico Horner playing up the middle is so that you have 2 Gold Glove caliber shortstops playing second base and shortstop. The whole point of Cody Bellinger in center field is so that you have, and Pete Crow Armstrong for that matter, is so that you have Gold Glove caliber defense in center. And frankly, the defense just hasn't been very good. And it hasn't been very good from some of those guys that we expect Gold Glove defense from. So that's cause for concern for me.
Right. I mean, and Ian Happ's a Gold Glover. I know it's not, sometimes they just give those Gold Gloves out and it scratch your head. But I mean, ideally, you're supposed to have 4 Gold Glovers out there, and obviously Cody's injured. But the 3 guys that are out there, Ian Happ and, like you mentioned, Dansby and Nico up the middle, it's just looked really weird. And I'm just trying to figure out, as a team, you can tell, you pull up the stats, they are not looking really good.
No, they're not. And I want to be really cautious here. And there's a lot of caveats and notes of caution in my piece, which is over at bleedcubbieblue.com. It came out on Wednesday afternoon. Today is Thursday, Wednesday afternoon. Look, defensive metrics are super noisy because it's such a small sample size, right? Like the number of balls that get hit to a left fielder varies considerably during a game. The left fielder might make 1 play. They might make 9 plays. It really depends on the situation that you're in, who's at the plate, who's pitching, a whole bunch of things. And so it's not the same as being like, oh, we're a month in, we can totally say that somebody's strikeout rate has improved or their barrel rate has improved. Like those are built off of a larger number of batted ball events that occur just through the course of getting your at-bats during a season. And defense isn't like that. You don't necessarily have the ball hit to you all the time, but there are some things that we can see. One is that, and you mentioned Ian Happ, who is a Gold Glover, but his defensive stats have some noise in them that lead me to question maybe the voting process that Rawlings and the good people over at Rawlings have used for that award. No shade to Ian Happ. I love him. I'm just not sure he's the best defensive left fielder in the game. Or the best defensive left fielder in the National League, as the case may be, either one. Ian Happ's defense has not been very good this season. I mean, yesterday's heroics aside, where he threw an absolute rope to Nick Madrigal, and Nick Madrigal made an excellent relay throw to nab Pete Alonso at the plate, Ian Happ's been worth -4 defensive run saves so far this season. Last season, he was worth -7 the entire season. That means over 20% of the innings, Ian Happ it's already more than half of the defensive runs lost over this course of the season that he had last season. That's a cause for concern for me.
Yeah, and there was that weird play, and I don't know if I'm going to have to wait till CubsCon to ask, where it was that Boston game, that last Boston game, that Sunday Night Baseball, where, they had the runner at third and no outs, and he's playing deep. And I'm like, when the heck is he? Like, was that Ian who was supposed to read the little card? Was there a manager who was supposed to wave him in? I mean, what in the heck was going on there?
I think that was the Cubs outsmarting themselves with the Green Monster. And I also was like, why is he playing deep? But even if you're playing deep in Boston, that is Happ's ball. Like, Happ should be able to come in from deep easier than Dansby can go out from shortstop, or Morel for that matter. There were moments where I actually thought Morel had a better angle on that particular play. And it's not because Dansby is bad. Dansby is a much better defender than Christopher Morel, but Morel is so athletic and he was kind of coming at it from the side as opposed to coming straight back, which is why Dansby couldn't make that play. But the guy who had the easiest play there and all the momentum to throw home, right? Because you're going to have to throw home, is Ian Happ. And he's just, I don't know, man. He's like slow rolling it in because he's like, Dansby's got it. It's like the hardest play possible for Dansby. And I lived in Boston for 6 years. The Monster wreaks havoc on all sorts of great defenders. So I'm not going to say that like Ian Happ definitely should have had that ball, but that's not a lone incident. You mentioned the play with Keegan Thompson today. We have Dansby Swanson throwing some throws over to first base that maybe a better first baseman or a more experienced first baseman than Michael Busch or Patrick Wisdom or Matt Mervis gets a handle on. But we don't have that first baseman over there until Cody Bellinger plays first base a little bit at some point in time, which I think is in the offing at this rate. We have guys who can't pick it. And so if you throw a ball in the dirt, those picks are just bad. Like you see them kind of like pull their glove up and they miss the ball by 3 feet. And it's really atrocious.
I think Cub fans, we've been so spoiled when you think about everybody from Anthony Rizzo to Derek Lee, Mark Grace, just the great first baseman that Cubs have been spoiled. And now it's But when you talk about Dansby Swanson, he was the big Cubs free agent signing 2 years ago, and it just blows my mind because when you look at him, and his value is from the glove. I mean, whatever you get from him offensively is good. You'll take it, but he's such a streaky kind of guy. It's like the majority of his value is being a Gold Glove defender. And I know that Michael Busch or Wisdom are not great at picking it or whatever, but Jesus, you got to be able to kind of put it in their chest for a lot of these plays. And I guess that's what's surprising when I look at some of the throws by Dansby. I'm just like, is he all right?
I have asked myself the same question, and I'm hoping that the noise in the defensive metrics right now, and again, I just want to reiterate, if you look at defensive stats, they are super noisy. They're very loud. And particularly with a month's worth of games, you're not talking about a ton of chances for any of these guys. So it's totally conceivable that a guy could be a bad defender in April and be a good defender over the course of the regular season, particularly given structural factors, right? Like the weather. The weather is very different in March and April, particularly in a place like Chicago, than it's going to be in June or July. A wet ball is harder to control. A cold hand throwing or a cold arm throwing is a very different situation than it's 90 degrees out. There are a ton of things that could influence this. But early on, we have not seen the types of, oh, yes, Dansby's got it plays that we have come to expect from him. Last season, he put up some astonishing numbers as a defender. I think that he led the team with 20 outs above average and 18 defensive runs saved. And this season, he's sitting at like 2. And 2 is not even close to on pace for what he did last season at this moment in time. And again, on pace isn't really a thing with defensive stats for all the reasons I've already outlined. But it doesn't look like Dansby is acting like the Gold Glover the Cubs thought they signed.
Yeah. And so, I mean, so we already knew that Christopher Morel was going to be a work in progress at third base. And I know, Sarah, you're such a big Christopher Morel fan. What are you seeing when you see Christopher Morel at third? What are the deficiencies and what do you think he's kind of improved upon?
Well, a couple of things. One, as I was working on this piece, I really wished that there was a way to look at splits for a positional player in their defensive metrics, like within even a smaller sample size. I know why you can't, because like I said, it's all kind of erratic and you don't have enough balls to say, oh, for 2 weeks, he was really bad. But now in these 2 weeks, he's really good. That said, I've seen Christopher Morel improve a lot at third base, and every hunch I ever had that if you just gave him the position, he would figure it out because he's so athletic and the arm is so strong has been borne out, in my opinion. I think there's at least one game that we can all agree Christopher Morel single-handedly saved. There's a ball that he leaped up on and saved that would have been a down-the-line double with runners on that was a go-ahead double that Christopher Morel makes that catch. Nick Madrigal has no prayer of making that catch. One of those guys is a lot taller than the other and has a lot larger arm reach than the other. And frankly, like Nick Madrigal can't jump 3 feet in the air, so he can't make that catch. And that's just a structural impossibility. I think that we've seen some throws from Christopher Morel that have been on point, actually. That arm is unbelievable. And I don't think Nick Madrigal can make those throws. I would love StatCast data on the throws Christopher Morel is making from third, because I'm telling you, some of those balls are like 97, 98 miles an hour. I mean, it's just unbelievable. It's like it's a Sean Dunston arm for good and for bad. I think he's improved a lot, and I think he's going to continue to improve as he plays that position more frequently. He's currently at -3 outs above average, which is the same number of outs above average he was at last season in 67 innings played at third base. He's played 162 in the third innings going into today at that position. And so he's already played 3 times the number of innings, and he's only made the same number of mistakes as far as that metric is concerned. That's really good news for Christopher Morel at third base. I want to go back to what you said about first base, though, because I think therein lies the real problem. The Cubs have not had a defensively positive first baseman outside of Cody Bellinger playing out of position since Anthony Rizzo. And one of the things I will always remember about Anthony Rizzo when he was traded to the Yankees, which broke my heart, by the way, I'm still not over it. He went to the Yankees and they had defensive problems all season long. Like it was a team that had the types of mistakes that we're seeing from the Chicago Cubs, frankly. And Anthony Rizzo was having a conversation with their third baseman at the time. For some reason, I believe that was Miguel Andujar, but it could have been somebody else. And he literally he said, just get it in my direction and I've got it. You throw the ball towards me and it will be an out. And it's true because Anthony Rizzo snags the ball here. He slows down. He can do the splits. Like Anthony Rizzo makes plays that make all of the other defenders on the dirt look better because he's snagging balls and picking it. And that's why he was a Gold Glove defender at first base for the Chicago Cubs for so long. Michael Busch might improve at first base. Matt Mervis might improve at first base. I don't think Patrick Wisdom is a first baseman. I hope I never see him there again. None of them will ever be Anthony Rizzo. What Anthony Rizzo was capable of doing at first base made the entire team better. And we saw this movie before last year, before Cody Bellinger was moved to first base to solve the exact same problem. And I hate watching it again when the team is doing so well otherwise.
Yeah, it's Trey Mancini and Eric Hosmer and all that fun stuff. So if we're anxiously waiting for Cody Bellinger. We don't know how long this is going to be, but PCA, he's looked good. He's made a couple defensive blunders himself, but you see the speed, you see all the, just what does make him fantastic. If Cody Bellinger comes back, do you see some sort of possibility where if the defense stays like it is, Cody Bellinger moves to first, and where would you then see Michael Busch?
I think Michael Busch would move to the designated hitter every single day. And then I think that becomes a conversation of like, how do those at-bats at DH go? It's probably a split between Michael Busch, Matt Mervis, and Patrick Wisdom. And frankly, I'm more interested in seeing Mervis and Busch get those at-bats than I am seeing Wisdom get them. This is no shade to Patrick Wisdom, by the way. I wrote about Patrick Wisdom in the offseason. And one of the things that's super interesting about him, if you just go look at a stat called ISO, which is isolated power, it's basically a metric of like how many extra base hits you get and how frequently you hit home runs. Patrick Wisdom is a historic power bat. He slots in there with names like Mickey Mantle. I'm not even joking. Like you look at the career leaders in ISO, Patrick Wisdom is elite. The problem for Patrick Wisdom is that none of those players had like a 35 to 40% strikeout rate, and Patrick Wisdom does. He's more Dave Kingman than Mickey Mantle at the end of the day. And there is a place on your bench for a guy who can pop a loud home run every now and again. He absolutely does not need to be playing defense anywhere on the field because he's not very good at it. And if you're trying to decide right now between who needs at-bats more, Patrick Wisdom, Matt Mervis, or Michael Busch, Matt Mervis and Michael Busch are your future. You can trade one of those guys for other guys who might help your team if they get on a hot streak. Patrick Wisdom, I don't think he's tradable. He's like he can hit 30 home runs and do a lot of damage along the way. And it's very cool to see. It's like his home runs are ridiculous. He holds the Cubs rookie home run record, which he took from Chris Bryant of all people for a reason and did it in like a fraction of the plate appearances. But he's not your future. He's a guy you play when you're running out the string and you don't have postseason hopes. And I wish him nothing but the best, but I think it's Matt Mervis and Michael Busch splitting time at DH.
Well, let me go a different route because you kind of pointed out that Nick Madrigal is, not playing good defense at third this year, but he comes in as a defensive replacement for Christopher Morel. And I just wonder, offensively, Madrigal's look bad. Defensively, he's taken steps back, I think, from last year. And so I just wonder why Patrick Wisdom wouldn't get those at bats more than Nick Madrigal.
Well, to be clear, in my world my blue sky world that I've got where all the Cubs are healthy and everything is going well, I don't think Nick Madrigal is getting a ton of at-bats either. I want to give him his flowers, though, because he played third base for the Cubs last year for 560 and a third innings, and he did an excellent job of it. He was the third highest number of outs above average on the team at 10. He was the third highest number of defensive runs saved on the team at 8. He looked excellent at third base last year, but I think a lot of that was two things. One, I think it was that he got a lot of reps there, and Nick Madrigal is a pretty, he's kind of a gritty defender. He can get it done. He's suffering right now from the same thing that Christopher Morel suffered from early. He's not playing the position, and so he doesn't look very good at it when he plays it. That's why when you look at Nick Madrigal's numbers this year, he's at -1 outs above average and 0 defensive runs saved in just a fraction of innings. It's probably not going to get better because I think Craig Counsell has correctly identified that the Cubs are a better team in 2 years if Christopher Morel, who has a bat for the ages. The guy hits for power and he does it easily. And what he's done this year decreasing his strikeout rate and increasing his walk rate while still hitting for power is one of the most impressive things I have ever seen from a young 23-year-old player. Like it's truly incredible. Nick Madrigal can't compete with that because if you ever go look at Nick Madrigal's spray chart, the thing that I always notice is the outfield can play in to the point where they can steal singles, right? Like with a guy like Nico Horner has enough power that the outfield has to respect him and play out a little bit. So Nico gets a lot of contact singles that drop in front of outfielders who are trying to protect against doubles, not singles. They don't have to protect against doubles with Nick Madrigal. The odds that he's going to hit the ball over their head is so small that they can just protect against singles. And that takes away a lot of the value of that contact tool that he has. So no shade to Nick Madrigal. I don't think there's a lot of room on him for this roster. He's not your DH and he's not your third baseman. He's like your backup second base replacement who doesn't play that as well as Christopher Morel, I think.
Now, one other guy that really has been an interesting, person to watch has been Miguel Amaya behind the plate.
He's been great.
And defensively, I think that he is really as far as calling a game, as far as framing, I mean, you've heard the pitchers praise him, but defensively, I think he's really, really impressed a lot of people. What do you think has impressed you the most about Miguel Amaya?
So the first thing that's really impressed me about Miguel Amaya is just he seems to be getting really comfortable calling games, and he's doing a great job for the Cubs as that catcher leader who, frankly, I was a little bit concerned coming into the year how they were going to split playing time between him and Yan Gomes. The front office and the coaching staff has always really liked what Yan Gomes brings to the table in terms of game calling, in terms of planning, in terms of his relationship with the pitcher. And Yan Gomes is fine, y'all. Like, I know I kind of bag on him a little bit because Wilson Contreras is my favorite. If you're watching this as opposed to listening to it, you can see Wilson Contreras behind me. And I sort of blame Yan Gomes for Wilson Contreras no longer being a Cubs. Although I really blame Jed Hoyer. It's not Yan Gomes' fault that they brought him in to be that replacement. Anyway, that's a podcast for another day. Yan Gomes is very old for a catcher. I don't know how often any of you squat, but like I get into that position on occasion at yoga and I'm ready to be done with it 30 seconds in. Like that's not a position that the human body was designed to hold for any length of time. Catchers do that for half a baseball game over and over and over again, which is why they generally don't age as well as other position players. I think we're coming to the end of the road with Yan Gomes, but he seems to have passed down a lot of the talent and skill that he had with managing a pitching staff, with framing, with how to balance. And it's a very delicate balance, right? Like being able to throw a runner out versus being able to frame a pitch those are directly in tension with each other. Because if you're trying to frame a pitch, you're trying to hold that ball in a right spot for the umpire to call it. If you're trying to throw a guy out, you have to move fast to throw the guy out. Those two things are hard to exist in tandem. And I think he's done a nice job of passing those skills on to Miguel Amaya. Miguel Amaya is starting to call some of the games for some of the Cubs young pitchers who he has worked with in AAA. Some of the pitchers are still calling their own games when Miguel is behind the plate, but I think he's done great. I see that 60-40 split turning into a 70-30 split by the end of the season. And as long as Amaya stays healthy, I don't see any reason that he shouldn't stay in the lineup.
Well, Sarah, I appreciate you jumping on here. And again, the article is on Bleed Cubbie Blue. It's called The Cubs Defense is Struggling, and our listeners can find your work there. Where can they follow you on the socials?
Yeah, you can find me pretty much anywhere at BCB_Sarah. There's no H on the Sarah, except Blue Sky, which doesn't allow underscores for some reason. So I'm at BCB Sarah there. But you can find my Cubs writing at bleedcubbieblue.com. And if you happen to be a fantasy baseball player, I host a podcast called Fantasy Feud on the Pitcher List Network. And I do some writing over at Baseball HQ as well.
You are one of the busiest Cub writers I know. I appreciate you taking a few minutes of your time, Sarah, and thank you so much for jumping on.
Anytime, Crawly.
This is Season 3, Episode 37. The Cubs take round 1 from the Brewers. This is the Fly the W670 podcast. Don't forget to listen, download, review, subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. Give us a 5-star review if you don't mind. And don't forget, you can watch us on the Score YouTube page. That's right, on the 670 The Score YouTube page. All right, Crawly, show us the standings.
Boom. Here we go. We're talking about minuscule percentage points behind the Brewers for first place. The Brewers at 20-13, the Cubs at 21-14. But essentially, again, just percentage points. The Reds right behind. They're 4 games back. Pittsburgh 5 games back. And welcome back to the basement. St. Louis last place at 15-19.
Dropping 2 of 3 to the lowly White Sox at home. Can you imagine what sports talk radio is like in St. Louis tonight and tomorrow?
Absolutely love it.
Absolutely wild, Crawly. All right, so that's where they are in the standings again. Padres are coming to town, and we've got news. Now I'm happy about it, but I don't agree with it. Shota Imanaga named the National League Rookie of the Month.
Yep, Shota finished April with a record of 4-0 with a .98 ERA, a .80 WHIP, and 28 strikeouts compared to 3 walks. A lot of people question whether or not Shota is a real rookie. I mean,
he's not a rookie. He's not a rookie. He's not a rookie.
I think he should have gotten NL Pitcher of the Month. That's
yes, sure, right. Yes, he should have. He could have gotten both, but he's still not a rookie.
Right. Now, on Saturday before the game, the Cubs got their 2023 Gold Gloves presented to them on the field. Dansby Swanson, Nico Horner, and Ian Happ received their hardware. And maybe that woke Dansby up because Dansby played really well in the field today, Sunday. Absolutely. And
2 stellar plays in the field.
We talked to Sara Sanchez, and one thing that Sara emphasized is that, it's still a sample size in a month. There's obviously some work that needs to be done, but we're hoping that all of these guys can get back to where they should be.
Absolutely. And we also had a new top 100 prospect list.
Yeah, Baseball America updates these throughout the season. And so like a guy like Michael Busch was in the Cubs top 100 prospects, but he's considered graduated now after a certain point in time, so that he's been with the big league club. So number 20 is Pete Crow Armstrong, 22 Cade Horton, 28 Matt Shaw, number 40 Owen Casey, 47 though is Jefferson Rojas. And we talked about him with BK, Brendan King, on the last podcast. He's in South Bend. He makes a huge jump, and the kid's just unbelievable right now. Kevin Alcantara's at 91, and then Moises Ballesteros entered the top 100 at number 93. So a good showing by the Cubs.
Yeah, very nice list. Very nice. Lots of good news there. All right, we got some news on Kyle Hendricks.
Yep, he made his minor league rehab start on Thursday after we recorded the podcast. Remember, he had some back issues, and so he pitched for the Tennessee Smokies, went 5 innings pitched, gave up 2 runs on 6 hits, 7 Ks, and no walks. He didn't give up a home run, which is good, right? Kyle will make his next rehab start on May 7th, on Tuesday, for the Iowa Cubs.
Will he make a 3rd rehab start?
Do not. I'm guessing he'll be ready to come up. And we talk about the possibility of what about Ben Brown as a closer?
Mm-hmm.
So that would be something that would possibly be interesting. But before the game Saturday, the Cubs sent DH Matt Mervis back to the minors and called up Miles Mastroboni. Mervis was 3 for 26 in 9 games with the Cubs. I don't know if you heard Craig Counsell say back to the drawing board with him.
Yeah.
Boy, it doesn't look like Craig's too impressed with Matt there. But, with Miles, he's a guy that gives you speed. You remember the other day that extra inning games in New York, they had 2 guys thrown out at the plate.
Right.
Miles gives you some speed.
Yeah, he probably scores when Madrigal didn't on that play.
Absolutely, pinch run in that situation. So, all right, we'll see what happens. How about this, though? Cody Bellinger and Seiya Suzuki have been doing hitting and defense drills. They're running the bases. Craig Counsell said Bellinger may rejoin the Cubs as early as this next week without a minor league rehab assignment. Now, Counsell said that Seiya would likely head out for a brief minor league assignment, but you wonder, hey, is it possible that Cody's back next week and the possibility that Seiya would come maybe a week later? And as this happens, Dustin, and I'm looking at this, I think PCA has been interesting on this team. I think he plays great defense. He steals bases.
Stole the base today, set up a run, right? Mm-hmm.
What do you think, or at least I just want your thoughts on the idea of once Cody Bellinger is back, the thing about Michael Busch is he still defensively struggles to pick at first base.
Right.
Would you potentially have Cody Bellinger play first and then have Michael Busch DH?
Yeah, I wouldn't hate that idea. I wouldn't hate that idea at all.
Or you could put Michael Busch at first, Cody in center, and then as it gets later in the game, you can take Cody Bellinger, put him at first, and put PCA in center.
Right. Could do that too. Yep.
So that gives you options. I'm just kind of curious.
Nice to have options, right?
Right. And Jordan Wicks has been playing catch and is built up to long toss. Imaging has shown that there is nothing structurally wrong with his forearm. So the hope is Jordan Wicks gets back as soon as possible.
So that's huge. That's huge news. And just like the news is huge that tomorrow we're going to see Justin Steele return. Padres are coming to town, and they made an interesting move just the other day. They traded for a great offensive weapon.
Yeah, go figure. Right before the series with the Cubs, right?
Mm-hmm. He get like 4 or 5 hits in his first game as a Padre or something crazy.
Yeah. The Cubs so far have faced the Padres once in San Diego as a series the Cubs fans would like to forget. Remember in game 1, the Cubs had an 8-0 lead going into the 6th. They knocked Yu Darvish out of the game, but then they gave up 7 runs in the bottom of the 6th. They're clinging to an 8-7 lead in the bottom of the 8th when Adbert Alzolay gave up a 2-run homer to Fernando Tatis Jr.'s, and the Padres stunned the Cubs 9-8. Cubs bounced back for game 2, winning 5-1 behind a Christopher Morel grand slam. That was the last time he had homered until recently in New York. And Ben Brown made his first starts. The Cubs dropped the rubber game 10-2 with Dylan Cease shutting down the Cubs and Kyle Hendricks getting tagged for 7 runs. But like you said, the Florida Marlins just traded one of the best hitters in the game, won the batting title in the AL and the NL.
And he had a great series. He had a great series against the Cubs.
Yep. Luis Ariz goes to the Padres for a reliever and 3 prospects. Not only that, the Marlins ate all their the salary on that one. So San Diego's paying Ariz the minimum, and it gets them lower under the cap. I don't know why the Marlins do these kind of things.
Yeah, well, they got 3 big prospects, right? So
yeah, but you got a hitting champion. I mean,
right. Oh no, they got something for him.
Gave that up, right?
That, right.
But the Padres right now are wrapping up a 3-game set with the Diamondbacks. They pounded the D-backs 7-1 on Friday, crushed them 13-1 on Saturday. And like you said, Arias got 4 hits in his first game with San Diego. And then they were finishing the last one up today. And I didn't see if you saw the score on that one. Looks like the Padres get their butts kicked 11-4. Diamondbacks are able to salvage 1 game of the series. So good. They get San Diego gets a bad taste in their mouth before coming to Chicago.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect.
So we got pitching probables for tomorrow. I will be at the game at Wrigley.
Ooh, nice one. Nice one.
How about this for a matchup? Justin Steele versus Yu Darvish.
Pretty good. Pretty good.
I have to be one of the few people that is going to see Justin Steele pitch for the second time. I saw him opening night. He injured his hamstring.
That's crazy. Yeah. Think about that. You're going to see both his starts so far.
Right. He was cruising. He threw 4.2 scoreless innings with 6 Ks before he got injured. He was an all-star last season with a record of 16-5 with a 3.06 ERA. Most of the Padres have only faced Steele once, but Luis Arias, who we just talked about, is 3 for 6 against Steele.
Isn't he like 3 for 6 against everybody? I mean,
right. Now, Yu Darvish is 1-1 with 6 starts. He has a 3.45 ERA, 25 Ks in 28 innings. On 4/14th, he gave up 3 runs to the Dodgers in 5 innings, and in his last start against the Reds, he didn't give up a run in 5 innings pitch. The Cubs saw Darvish the last time they played the Padres on April 8th. The Cubs racked up the pitch count. Darvish only went 3 innings pitch and gave up 4 runs on 4 hits with 2 walks, gave up a home run. The Cubs don't usually hit Darvish well. Yan Gomes has the best average against you, 5 for 11. Dansby's 3 for 17. Nico 1 for 7, and Morel is 1 for 6. We've talked about how Darvish has an arsenal of 8 different pitches, but everything really works off the 4-seamer and the slider.
All right, game number 2, Shota Imanaga. Now, are you a little disappointed because Shota was supposed to start this game?
I've seen 2 Shota starts, so I'm
all right. Well, so so they're okay. You gotten to see him twice, then that's okay.
Yeah, but who wouldn't want to see him again? Shota's 5-0 with a minuscule 0.78 ERA, 35 Ks and 34.2 innings pitched. He gave up 2 runs against Miami on 4/20. 1 run against Boston on 4/26, and no runs in 7 innings against the Mets. He did not face the Padres yet, but Luis Ariz didn't get a hit off of him when the Marlins faced the Cubs. He went 0 for 3, actually, Dustin. So how about that?
Oh, wow, an 0 for.
Yep. We found out right before recording this episode that Joe Musgrove, who was the scheduled starter, is scratched. He's going on the 15-day IL with right elbow inflammation. Randy Vasquez has been called up from AAA to take his spot. Vasquez came to San Diego in the Juan Soto trade with the Yankees. Last season with New York, he appeared in 11 games and started 5. He had a 2-2 record with a 2.87 ERA. This season with the Padres, he started in AAA, called up on April 20th versus Toronto in 5 innings pitched, and gave up 4 runs, but only one of them was earned. In the next start against the Rockies, he went 2.2 innings, gave up 4 runs on 6 hits, and they sent him back to AAA after that. Vasquez throws a 4-seamer, sweeper, curveball, and sinker. No Cub has yet faced Vasquez.
All right, so we'll see. We'll see. I mean, it's okay that you haven't faced the guy. Always seems to be an excuse, though, right? When things don't go, that they don't have a book on him or something like that. So that's the second game, and then we've got a day game to wrap things up. A proper 3-game series, right, Crawly?
Love it. Hayden Wesniewski versus Dylan Cease. Hayden Wesniewski is 2-0 with a .54 ERA in 4 games. He started 2. He's thrown 16.2 innings with 14 Ks. In his last 2 starts, he gave up 1 run against Boston and shut down the Brewers. He keeps building up his pitch count. Against Milwaukee, he went 6.1 innings. The Padres faced Hayden last season. Most hitters have only had 3 at-bats against him, but Machado is 2 for 2. Now, Dylan Cease is 4-2 with the 2.55 ERA with 48 Ks in 42.1 innings pitched. He struggled 2 starts ago against the Phillies. He gave up 5 runs in 6 innings pitched, but got back on track against the D-backs, going 6.2 innings, giving up 1 run on 3 hits. Cease faced the Cubs on April 10th. He gave up 2 runs on 2 hits in 6 innings, but both runs were unearned as Christopher Morel reached on an error and Michael Busch hit a 2-run blast. The Cubs, like we said, lost that game 10-2. Most of the Cubs don't have a lot of at-bats against Cease. Ian Happ is 1 for 16, Morel 0 for 6, and Nico 0 for 4. Cease is mainly a 2-pitch pitcher, 4-seamer and slider. He'll throw you an occasional knuckleball and a knuckle curve and a sweeper.
Yeah, I'm not loving these pitching matchups. I got to tell you, they're not super exciting as a fan that this is what's happening right now.
You don't like these pitching matchups?
No, they scare me a little bit. I got to be honest.
Right, but like, let's say you were just a fan of baseball.
Oh, sure, right, yeah. On that part, I'm saying as a fan of the Cubs, I'm a little bit worried about. We're not at the prediction stage just yet, but I'm a little bit nervous, Crawly. I'm a little bit nervous.
I understand, and then the hope is you've seen the Cubs kind of generate some offense the last 2 days against Milwaukee, and if they can do that, then like I said, when you see what their starting pitching has done, they can compete with anybody,
Right? Yes, they can. All right, hot and not Cubs.
Nico Horner, 8 for his last 28, slashing 286, 355, 500. He has a home run and 3 RBIs. Ian Happ is starting to warm up a little bit, and so is Christopher Morel. Even though Christopher Morel isn't, 6 for his last 23, 4 of those 6 hits are home runs with 9 RBIs.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
You see in Dansby Swanson, he's 3 for his last 22. He does have a home run and an RBI, so he's slashing 136, 208, 273, so he needs to pick it up. And then Nick Madrigal hasn't done much lately, 1 for 9, so he's in the cold camp.
Who do we have to be watching out for from the Padres?
Well, again, Luis Arias just got there, so just be on the lookout for him. He doesn't, right now he's 4 for 6 in a San Diego Padres uniform. Jerickson Profar is 11 for 19 with 2 home runs and 5 RBIs. So he's slashing 579, 600, 947. Look out. Their third baseman, Tyler Wade's 5 for his last 13. Jake Cronenworth is 8 for his last 22 with 2 home runs and 6 RBIs. And Manny Machado always gives the Cubs, he gives everyone fits. He's 6 for his last 21 with a home run and 9 RBIs.
And I've seen that their highly paid shortstop is not necessarily delivering for them.
Well, Xander Bogaerts is playing second. He is now 4 for his last 17. He's slashing 176, 176, 235. And Ha-Sung Kim has been playing shortstop for him. He's struggling too, 3 for 19. So up the middle, they're really struggling.
Maybe they should switch.
Yeah, see what happens. Might go a little bit better for him.
You never know, right? You never know. All right, you heard me kind of tease it, Crawly. Prediction time. I'll go first. I'm going to say the Cubs only get one of these. Not loving the pitching matchups. Now, if you're telling me that Bellinger is going to play in this entire series, I might feel a little bit different. I'm guessing that Justin Steele on Monday night is going to probably be around 70 pitches, right? The pitch count. So against you, Darvish, the offense hasn't been awesome. It's kind of home run or nothing kind of, right? They don't manufacture a lot of runs. So I'm going to say the Cubs only get one of the 3 in this one. You?
I'm going to try to be positive. I'm going to say the Cubs take 2 of 3. I'm going to will this into existence. I need the Cubs to win tomorrow when I go to see Justin Steele. And I think that Shota is going to be able to take down Randy Vasquez. I think the Cubs are going to tag him. I feel less confident about Hayden Wesniewski versus Dylan Cease.
Well, that's a wrap. Don't forget to listen, download, review, and subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. Follow on all the socials, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and email us. That's right. Email Crawly and I, flythew670@gmail.com. And you can watch us by subscribing to the 670 The Score YouTube channel. Crawly, enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and we'll get back together Wednesday or Thursday to wrap up the Padres series.
And just remember something, the Cubs have not lost a series at home. So as the song says, get on down to Wrigley Field. Go Cubs! Hey guys, it's Crawly. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Go Cubs!